Hey, welcome back. In the previous videos, we learned how to create absolute and relative macros. And to run those macros, you click on this button and pick the macro you want, and then click Run, and away you go. Now, one of the questions I'm often asked is, hey, Dr. Jones, once I record a macro, can I then use it in other workbooks? And well, sort of. When you record a macro, it's only associated with the workbook that you have open. However, when you start recording a macro, let me turn on this thing. It says store macro in this workbook, so that's default. That means it's only available in this workbook. You can pick one of these other options, and then it adds the macro into your Microsoft Excel template, so that pretty much any workbook you create from that point on has that macro. I really don't recommend you do that. Generally, you only want it to be in the workbook that you've recorded. If you want to copy a macro from one workbook to another workbook, there's an easy way to do that. You go over to the Visual Basic Editor, and the simplest thing is you can just copy and paste the code into a module window in another workbook. Or you can right-click on a module and export it to a file, and then go to your other workbook and select Import File, and select that file and open it. And that way that's another way to add all the macros. But in general, in most cases, you want the macro to be associated with the workbook where you actually recorded it. Okay, back to our original topic. I showed you how to run these macros, and using this little button here. What if you want to provide a little quicker access to these? There's actually an easy way to do that. You can add a custom menu up to on your workbook. Now, I'd be careful doing this because that menu kind of stays there even when you open other workbooks, but yeah, it's kind of fun, so I'm going to show you how to do it. If you go here to the File menu and select Options and Customize Ribbon, there's a way to create a new tab. It's over here on the right. We're going to select, let's minimize that. We'll do New Tab, and we're going to call it, let's see, we're going to rename it My Macros. I right-clicked and selected the rename command. And then inside that, we can have groups. So I'm going to rename this group to be table format. And you can pick a little icon here if you want. Let's see, how about that one? And then our next thing is to add a macro here. So if you go over here on the left and you select macros, it gives you a list of all the macros you have created. So we can go over here and say format. I'm going to drag that over. Format table absolute, format table rel, unformat absolute, and unformat rel. And then let's create another group. Let's say our second group will be, we'll call this MISC here for our other options. And I'm going to randomly pick an icon here. And then I'm going to say under this, we're going to put add plot and add stats. Now, by the way, you can change the icon for each of these individual macros if you want, but we're going to leave these with these little script macros, and or excuse me, these default icons. And let's just click OK. And now over here you should see this new tab, and there are two sections in it. So if I click unformat abs, it runs that one, format abs, or I can unformat abs. I can select those. I can select those cells and just say format relative. Format relative. I can do add plot, and let's try this one. Add stats. Add stats. Boom. So yeah, there you go. Really great, simple way to get immediate access to your macros. Now I'm going to show you another one, and that's to create a control. And I'm going to kind of go through this quickly because there's another set of videos that goes through this process quite extensively. But if you go here in the controls section and do insert and then go down to the ActiveX section, and there's this little rectangular thing that allows us to create a button. And if I click on that button and click properties, it brings up this properties window. I can call this button CMD table rel or something, and I'm going to call this format table. We'll just link it to our relative command, and then I'm going to Control C and Control V to create a copy of that. So I have a second button. Whoops, got a little ahead of myself there. And I'm going to bring up the properties window again, and we'll call this CMD unformat. That's the name of the button, and we'll call this unformat table. Okay, so that's, we have two buttons now. And now to link this to my code, I'm going to double click on that and delete this stuff I created earlier. And what this does, it brings up the code for this sheet number 1. And here inside this sub here, I'm just going to type the name of my macro, format table REL. That's it. So basically what happens when I double click on that button, it brings up this sub, and whatever I type, whatever code I put here is executed when you click on that button. That's the way that works. And so if I type in the name of the macro, it'll run that macro. And same thing here, I'm going to do unformat table, or unformat REL, I think is the name of that. And now we go back here, we'll save our changes. We're going to exit design mode, and I'm going to select this and say unformat. Unformat, and again, if I want to run the format button, I just select the table, format. You can do part of a table if you want, and away you go. So yeah, if you don't want to bother going to this macros thing, you want to get a little bit quicker access, you can create yourself a custom menu, or you can create buttons that'll provide immediate access to those macros.